This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 73 of Here's How for the 7th of June 2018. Last year I covered the issue of Regret, the anti-HPV vaccine group, but I couldn't get anyone to interview from the anti-vaccine side. Now I have, so let's hear what he has to say on the topic.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Before I play this interview, I want to explain a bit about where I'm going with the podcast. Most people are aware of the Irish anti-Gardasil vaccine group Regret. The Gardasil vaccine protects girls against strains of the HPV virus which cause cervical cancer. Regret have claimed that they represent 450 girls who, according to them, became extremely ill because of the vaccine, and they claim that about 200 of them are so ill that they are on 24-hour suicide watch. Regret has raised considerable amounts of money on the back of this claim, although it's not a registered charity, and it has refused requests to publish any form of accounts. I've covered Regret's claims before. I've invited their spokesperson to participate in the podcast on numerous occasions, and they've refused. I've sent written questions to Regret and received no response. I'm also aware that Regret have refused to engage with journalists from a number of newspapers and threatened to sue them and RTE's Primetime, who covered the story, and they've made vague threats of legal action against me. Recently, another group has been set up. It's got the rather grand title of the International Federation for Injured Children and Adults, and it's based in a business park in Drumshanbo, County Leitrim. One of the founders is a guy called Sean Wynne. He's a primary school teacher in Leitrim who convinced the annual conference of his union, the Teachers' Union of Ireland, to pass a motion questioning the administration of the vaccine in schools. This organisation held a conference in Dublin in April, which was attended by several speakers, including Anna Cannon, a leading spokesperson for Regret. Their website claimed that there would also be a speaker from the Health Service Executive at the conference, although the HSE said that they would not send anybody. I contacted Sean Wynne to ask him to do an interview, and he initially seemed positive. Then he said that he wanted to see a list of questions that I would ask before he'd agree to an interview, and then he stopped answering my emails. You can imagine that it's a bit frustrating to have organisations supposedly looking for publicity who refuse to supply a speaker for an interview. All the more so when it was reported that, at the conference, speakers condemned the lack of coverage in the media to loud applause from the audience. However, I want to extend sincere thanks to Steve Hinks. You'll hear his interview in a moment. He runs a similar anti-Gardasil vaccine organisation in the UK, and he was at the conference in Dublin, but he was good enough to agree to an interview and to actually do it, even if you can hear his dog scampering around in the background at points. However, this is a complex and technical issue. In science, it's not the case that everyone's opinion is equally valid. If we're debating which is better, The Wire or The Sopranos, then every opinion counts. If we're debating whether a vaccine causes an illness, not so much. Either it does or it doesn't. The opinion of an immunologist with years of training and decades of experience is not of equal value to someone who has watched a few YouTube videos on the topic. Scientists have developed detailed protocols for testing evidence. Scientific journals are an important part of this. When a scientist makes a breakthrough, they don't just put it on their blog or tweet it out or send out a press release. They submit it to a scientific journal, basically a magazine for nerds. and the journal only prints it after they get other scientists expert in that field to check the work. The scientist sets out the procedures followed, explains the line of reasoning and the calculations, and declares any potential conflicts of interest. So, if you read about a new wonder drug, it matters where you're reading about it. If it's the front page of the Daily Mail, and it says that the drug will cure cancer and stop immigration and increase the value of your house, don't get too excited. But if it's in a scientific journal, then that's a different matter. That doesn't mean that everything in a scientific journal is right. Humans can still make mistakes, and if a mistake is spotted, either by the author or by other scientists, the author will typically amend the paper or withdraw it in part or whole. If the author refuses to do this, other scientists can write a rebuttal. And if it's valid, this can lead the scientific journal to withdraw the paper, even if the author doesn't agree. The whole point of this process is that it's out in the open. Anyone can comment, anyone who spots a mistake can point it out. There are even specialist websites where anyone who thinks they can spot an error can note it against the scientific paper, and anyone else can see that and expand on the point or investigate further. Nobody can say, "I'm a famous, important scientist, so you should believe what I say." No matter how renowned you are, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm mentioning this because renown has no place in deciding what's true, and neither does emotion. In this interview, Steve talks about his daughter being ill, and I've no reason to doubt him. I'm sure that has been difficult for his family, but that doesn't mean that there's a lower standard of evidence for believing what he says about science compared to anyone else. I've gone through the claims that he's made very carefully and taken advice on them. You'll hear that I break into the interview to clarify some mistakes that both he and I made during the recording, because I think that it's very important that incorrect statements are not allowed to stand. Obviously, this has been a lot of work for me. I've put a huge amount of research into the podcast, and this is what I'd like to keep doing on loads of other topics. That's why I set up a Patreon account. Patreon, if you don't know it, is a website that allows people to make small donations to a creator each time they upload a podcast or whatever work they're doing. I want to say thanks to Justin Shorten, who very generously signed up as a patron since the last podcast. My goal is to get to a point where I can do a high-quality current affairs podcast show that's independent of RTE and O'Brien, and do it at least fortnightly, if not more. So if you think that is worthwhile, please go to www.here'show.ie and follow the links to support the podcast. There are some other options in there as well, and also it helps hugely if you share the podcast on social media or in real life. Anyway, now the interview.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On a Skype line now, I have Stephen Hinks. Stephen is the Vice Chair and one of the founders of the UK Association of HPV Vaccine Injured Daughters. Stephen was at a conference in Ireland of what is called the International Federation for Injured Children and Adults, that specifically refers to the HPV vaccine as well. Stephen, can you tell me in a couple of words, what exactly is the motivation for creating your organisation?
The motivation started in 2011 when my daughter was severely injured by the HPV vaccine. I have zero doubt that the vaccine was a cause of the injury. And when I researched the vaccine, we've been told it was safe and effective. And when I researched it, I found that there were many girls and many families that had been affected since its introduction in the UK in 2008.
You'll be aware that there is a active organisation in Ireland called Regret, which makes a similar claim and claims to represent, I think they have said, 450 girls who they believe were adversely affected by the HPV vaccine. That's Gardasil is the brand name on that vaccine. There's been various stories about that group Regret, but the first thing I really want to ask you is, you say that you have zero doubt that it was the vaccine that caused your daughter's ill health. Why is that?
My wife was called in less than 2 hours after the vaccine was administered to collect my daughter from school, because she had an adverse reaction, or she was suffering with illness immediately after the vaccine. So she was collected within less than, she had the vaccine at 10 minutes past 10 in the morning, and my wife collected her from school before lunchtime. And her health just deteriorated day after day, week after week, month after month, until she was sleeping 23 hours a day and had constant, permanent, total headaches that we couldn't be taken away. And the vaccination was in May. She was sleeping 23 hours a day by July and August. And in September, she went into a coma-like sleep where she never opened her eyes and was never properly conscious for 3 months.
And you said that was in 2011. How is she now?
She has suffered with illness. It is a relapsing illness. So there can be tiny improvements day by day, week by week, month by month, and then there can be a crash, and you're right back almost at the start again. And 1.5 years ago, it was a terrible year. This last 12 months, things have improved, but she is still suffering. You have to remember, of course, that this is a teenager that was doing exceptionally well at school and expecting to go to university, and she was going for 13 GCSEs A-star. And after the vaccination, she never went back to school.
You're aware, I know because we've talked about it, of the Irish group Regret, which makes largely the same claims for the people that they say they represent. There's been a number of issues with that organisation. In particular, I know that a number of other journalists have made attempts to contact them and to talk about them and ask them about their claims. They have responded more often with legal threats than actually supplying information. Evidence is something that's important here, and I'm just looking at one study here. It's of 180,000 girls who got the vaccine and were studied between 2007 and 2013. The long and the short of that result was that there was no greater danger to those girls of an autoimmune disorder or other associated diseases, such as your daughter has suffered from, than from unvaccinated groups. Do you dismiss entirely the possibility that it was a chance association?
I dismiss it totally, 100%, and there are a couple of reasons. I'll tell you why. Virtually every study that I've ever come across has been supported financially, either directly or indirectly, by the vaccine manufacturers.
Hold on for a second. Hold on for a second, Stephen. All drug companies are required to pay for the safety testing on their own drugs. That's not paid for by the taxpayer. Drugs companies are required to pay for it themselves. That's no different with Gardasil.
What you find is that the drug companies are then selective as to which studies they publish, and they reject and do not publish the ones that identify problems with their vaccines. But what I would say to you,
but to be clear, Stephen, the research that I'm referring to here was funded by Ontario's Health Ministry.
The Ontario Health Ministry one, which I think is a recent one.
Yes,
I actually put a comment against that on their website because the study they do is comparing the studies that the manufacturers do, compares the vaccine side effects with what they call a placebo.
Mm-hmm.
But the placebos for these vaccines are not true placebos. A true placebo should be a saline with no active ingredients in it. But the placebos used by the supposed placebos used by the vaccine manufacturers contained all of the ingredients of the vaccine, including the aluminium salts and the adjuvants, with the exception of the HPV part of the vaccine.
I want to stop you on that, Stephen, just for clarity, and just because you'll appreciate that a lot of the listeners don't necessarily have a technical background, and I've read very carefully on this. There is, when you get the vaccination, you get the vaccine itself, which is a dead or deactivated part of a virus, which is intended to alert your immune system and allow you to fight that virus if you get a real version of it, if you're exposed to that. It also contains what's called an adjuvant. That's to say something to increase the activity of the immune system. And you're correct that sometimes placebos are used as what's called a saline, which is basically just salty water, and people are not told. I have read this very carefully, and it seems very clear to me from the research that the placebos used were both a saline and the adjuvant minus the vaccine, and that same vaccine, that same adjuvant, is used for many other vaccines without any incident.
That's not correct, in fact. Aluminium has been used in low doses for many years in a certain form, but the recent vaccine, the recent adjuvants, much stronger and a different type of aluminium salt, and the quantity requires to be a much stronger boost for the vaccine, because the HPV vaccine is a genetically modified vaccine. It does not contain, or is not supposed to contain, HPV. It is manufactured from insect material to be similar to HPV. But because it's genetically modified and supposedly doesn't contain HPV, they require a much stronger adjuvant. And the adjuvants used in the HPV vaccines are much stronger than those previously used.
Can I ask you, Stephen, do you have a medical background?
I was the UK Environment, Health and Safety Manager for a blue chip company here in the UK. So I don't have a medical background. I have an health and safety background. And what I share with people is based on the research I've done in the last 7 years, basically. But going back to the Ontario study...
hold on that for a second.
Yeah?
I want to analyze this very carefully, because I know it's a very emotive issue, and I know that your daughter has been ill, and I'm sure that's an extremely important issue for you. But you do accept that immunologists, people who have studied this, be they employed by pharmaceutical firms or by the health service, that is a qualification that takes literally decades to acquire. Can you understand that people are skeptical about someone who has essentially informed themselves with a Google degree?
I haven't informed myself with a Google degree. What I've informed myself with is research, the vast majority of which is by analysing the manufacturer's own information, which the manufacturers provide, their patient information leaflets and their studies. Mm-hmm. But also I have used freedom of information requests and parliamentary questions. Mm-hmm. So I haven't got a Google degree. I've obtained information which is from manufacturers, from the World Health Organization, from the UK Parliament.
You would accept that all that information is available to professionals in this area?
Yes, but the professionals don't tell the public the truth. They tell them that this vaccine is safe and effective. Mm-hmm. This vaccine has never been proven to prevent a single case of cancer.
Explain.
Never been proven to prevent. There's zero evidence that it has ever prevented a single case of cancer or ever will prevent a single case of cancer.
Hold on for a second. HPV is a vaccine. It vaccinates against a virus which triggers a cancer. So are you disputing that?
I am disputing it. If you watch the documentaries that we were involved in called Sacrificial Virgins.
Oh, hold on for a second. YouTube documentaries are one thing. I'm more interested in scientific studies.
This has scientists and it has medical professors involved in the documentary.
Is it published science?
Yes, it's published science.
It's
yes.
in scientific journals?
Absolutely. Totally, utterly.
I may ask you if you can provide links for that. What I do in the podcast very often is provide sources in the webpage associated with the podcast so that people can view those for themselves.
Yes, I can do that.
One of the things that makes me very uneasy about the Regret organisation in Ireland, which I think is you're at least familiar with, essentially claims made that seem implausible and are unverifiable, and claims made which are clearly false. And when an organisation makes
let me
claims...
correct you there. Please let me correct you there.
Go ahead, yeah.
I have been in contact with the ladies from the Regret team, and I do not believe their claims are false at all, because their claims are very similar. We have also a similar number of members, over 500 members. And in 2015... In the UK.
Which is a country maybe 15 times larger.
Okay, but in 2015, the European Medicines Agency did a review of the safety of the vaccine with respect to just two side effects. POTS, known as postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and CRPS, complex regional pain syndrome. The POTS had been raised particularly in Denmark, and the CRPS had been raised by Japan. And we had over 100 questionnaires submitted by our families whose daughters have been injured. And I'll read you out one or two comments, which is why I am totally convinced that this vaccine is relevant and caused by causing these symptoms.
I'm going to pause you on that for a second, Stephen, because what I said was very clear, was that some of the claims made by Regret seem implausible and are not backed up, and some of them are clearly false. And I'll just get you to listen to one clip of Anna Cannon on a radio interview.
So, I mean, we know that most of the safety studies are done based on the manufacturer's own trials and own research. And if you look at Merck's own trials, in 2010, 1 in 30 displayed serious adverse events, and they would be very serious. It would be long-term health impairment, hospitalisation long-term, wheelchair for life, death, birth defects, and so on. And 1 in 40 experienced a new autoimmune condition.
That's saying there that 1 person in 30 who got the vaccine experienced serious adverse events such as being hospitalized long-term, confined to a wheelchair. 1 in 30 means basically 1 girl in every classroom of girls who got the vaccine. That's complete nonsense.
I will provide you with a link to an earlier Canadian study.
No, hold on for a second. Millions of people, I think something like 22 million girls have gotten this vaccine around the world. 1 in 30 would be almost a million girls. That is an absolutely nonsense claim.
That is probably the number of vaccines that have been distributed, and most girls have at least 2, if not 3, of these vaccines.
So you would be talking about hundreds of thousands of girls long-term hospitalized or in wheelchairs around the world. That's simply untrue. Both myself and Steve got our figures wrong there. In fact, there have been about 400 million doses of the HPV vaccine administered worldwide since its creation. Originally, the vaccine schedule was 3 doses, later that was reduced to 2, so that means that well over 150 million people worldwide have been given that vaccine. Put that together with Anna Cannon's claim that 1 in 30 of the people who get the vaccine suffer life-altering side effects, like being in a wheelchair for life, long-term hospitalization or death, that will be more than 5 million girls. Think about that for a moment. 5 million girls, somewhere in the Western world where that vaccine is available, supposedly with drastic health consequences. And not one of them has sued. To put that 5 million number in context, thalidomide, the biggest medical scandal in history, affected 10,000 babies. That led to an industrial-scale legal operation with hundreds of millions paid in damages and criminal charges filed against the directors of the manufacturing company. But we're asked to believe a supposed scandal with 50 times more victims has not generated a single claim in more than 10 years.
I will provide you with a link to the World Health Organization Global Adverse Drug Reaction Reporting System. And if you type in Gardasil or HPV vaccine, you will see a number of reports of adverse drug reactions for the HPV vaccine. I want to just explain for the listeners, because no, I'm going to pause you for a second, because not everybody has a technical background, and I want to explain the term an adverse reaction. An adverse reaction basically means anything bad that happens to you after you get administered a drug or a vaccine, and all of these are recorded. This would include if you get a vaccination and you, say for example, a girl and walks out of school and is run down by a bus, that will be recorded as a death following the vaccination. There's no requirement for an adverse event to have a proven or even a suspected link between the medicine. If you just know, I'm going to just finish this, Stephen. There's no requirement to have any proof of a link between the two. In addition, an adverse reaction, and I've looked at the list in Ireland, a very large proportion of them are essentially fainting. And what you get is a group of excitable schoolgirls and a young male doctor with a syringe, and girls faint both before and after they get the injection. That's a very large proportion of what is recorded as adverse reactions. That is not correct. It is a large-ish proportion, but it is nowhere near the amount of adverse reactions that are far more serious. There are far many more serious. But before I go back to the VG-Access, the World Health Organization Global Database, and I'll go back to some more detail on there. If you go onto the VG-Access database, there are over 309,000 adverse drug reactions, and the proportion of those that are fainting or minor or only last for a few days or a few weeks.
I've read this on the Irish statistics. 10%. Of the reports, and there's something like 1,200 adverse reaction reports in the Irish database, and that's what I'm familiar with. Of that 1,200, more than 70% had been resolved. That's to say, the person had recovered from them before the report was made. That
is not what I find from freedom of information requests here in the UK. Here in UK...
Well, I've read that entire list.
I will send you the list from the UK, and I will send you the list from the over 309,000 adverse drug reactions, including 445 deaths, which includes 21 sudden deaths, and includes cervical cancers and neoplasms, and many cases of I think it's about 3,000 of severe pain. And this severe pain isn't something that lasts for a few days or a few weeks or a few months. My daughter's headache, severe chronic headache, lasted over 5 years. She was totally disabled by headache. Let's just go back.
Stephen, I'm not disputing that your daughter clearly became very ill. There's no disputing that at all.
Not only my daughter, but thousands of others as well.
I want to actually address that because, first of all, Anna Cannon there, and it's very clear what she's claiming, that 1 in 30 has a severe adverse event caused by the vaccine, and that's plainly untrue given the enormous numbers of people who've had that vaccine. I want to just go to one other claim that Anna Cannon made. This was when she spoke.
Can we just try and focus on that one? Because the vaccine manufacturers, Merck, when they did the trials for Gardasil 9, they reported 2.3%. That's 2.3 per 100 girls had severe autoimmune adverse reactions.
I'm going to stop you on that one right there because I've got that.
That's in Merck's own literature.
That is, and I have that piece of literature actually in front of me on the screen. And what it says is that of the vaccinated group, 2.3% of them displayed the symptoms of some autoimmune disease or other. That would be, for example,
severe autoimmune diseases, it actually states.
And the unvaccinated group had the same exact percentage. So
No,
this is a large... I've got it in front of me.
Well, I've got it in front of me that in the studies done by Merck, it wasn't unvaccinated. It was those vaccinated with Gardasil, the quadrivalent vaccine. So the comparison for the study, there was 2.5% that had severe autoimmune diseases with Gardasil, the quadrivalent vaccine, and 2.3% that had severe autoimmune diseases with the Gardasil 9. So it wasn't comparing vaccinated with unvaccinated. It was comparing vaccinated with vaccinated.
In that case, I'm perhaps looking at a different document to what you're looking at. I'm going to break in there. I actually had a different study in front of me, and I've gone through the document that Steve was actually referring to, which he was kind enough to send to me. I can understand that he may have tripped over his words in the heat of the moment. Steve referred to severe autoimmune diseases. In the document, it actually says serious adverse events. They're not the same thing. Serious adverse events include car accidents, suicides, or sporting injuries, as well as any type of illness. All of these have to be reported when they happen to someone in a clinical trial, even if they are clearly not relevant. The paragraph that Steve highlighted for me in an email when I asked him for his source reads as follows. Out of the 13,309 individuals who were administered Gardasil 9 and had safety follow-up, 305 reported a serious adverse event, representing 2.3% of the population. 5 individuals administered Gardasil 9 reported at least one serious adverse event that was determined to be vaccine-related. The vaccine-related serious adverse events were pyrexia, allergy to the vaccine, asthmatic crisis, headache, and tonsillitis. No vaccine-related deaths were reported. So to be clear, that's 5 girls out of more than 13,000 with a reaction to the vaccine that was considered to be serious. And the serious reactions were pyrexia, that's running a temperature, an allergy to the vaccine, an asthma attack, a headache, and tonsillitis. The 2.3% figure is 2.3% of the total population that had something bad happen to them. Anything. They sprained an ankle, they got a disease, they were in a car crash. To claim that everything bad that happens to anyone who gets a vaccine is caused by the vaccine is not sensible. For example, Regret, including on their Facebook page, they have cited what they say deaths to people who have received the vaccine.
Correct.
And they point to Merck's own literature. And it's true. Merck did large-scale trials on this, and when you have any large number of people who are in a trial, if you have thousands of people, some of them are going to die. And this is a direct quotation. I'm quoting direct from the literature here. It says it's notable that this was done in the United States. The most common cause of death was motor vehicle accident. 5 individuals who received Gardasil, 4 who got the control, followed by drug overdose or suicide, 2 who got Gardasil, 6 who got the control, gunshot wound, 1 with Gardasil, 3 who got the control, and it goes down then through the declining number of causes of death. It is absolute nonsense to suggest that people who died in a car accident after, perhaps years after they got a vaccine, that death can be attributed to the vaccine.
Not as daft as you might think, because many of these girls, not only was the fainting at the time of the vaccination, but the fainting occurs on a regular basis. Not only fainting, but proper seizures. But some of the girls, my daughter was housebound, bedbound, wheelchair-bound for 4 or 5 years. Do you not think you become suicidal after something like that? There are, again, I will provide you with a recent suicide with a boy that was vaccinated in the United States. His was definitely caused by the vaccine, and he was suicidal because of the pain and suffering that he was caused by this vaccine.
what that is, and clearly that sound like tragic events. I'm not familiar with them, but they certainly are tragic. And I'll put them on the website. And if you have any other sources, I will link them on the website as well. But those are anecdotes, and you'll be familiar with Dr. Jesper Mehlsen. He was a Danish doctor who spoke at the conference in Dublin, which you attended. That was, yeah. And I spoke to him earlier and I asked him specifically, was there any known statistical association between the vaccine and any illness? And this was our exchange. Do you have any evidence that chronic fatigue syndrome occurs at a different rate amongst the girls who have got the HPV vaccine compared to a similar control group who have not?
No, that study hasn't been done yet. But what we've done is we've looked at antibodies in girls who have been vaccinated who do not have symptoms, and girls who have symptoms.
Who would be the overwhelming majority?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when we look at the girls that have not been vaccinated, the frequency of antibodies in that group is about 20%, and in the group who have been vaccinated is 93%.
Okay, so what he's saying there is that people who have been vaccinated obviously have antibodies in their system because they've been exposed to that the vaccine for that virus, but there has been no statistical association found. There hasn't been no study done that found an association between the vaccination and any ill effects.
Do you not think it's a total tragedy that none of the medical professionals that are paid either directly or indirectly by pharmaceutical companies or the pharmaceutical companies themselves will not do the study?
They have done the study. So there's Merck are required to do that. They've done studies with tens of thousands of people. And as I mentioned, the Ontario Health Ministry also did a study which was independent.
The Ontario Health Ministry, their study was totally flawed. The previous one that was done in Ottawa in Canada, they said this vaccine was safe and effective. But they also stated that 10% of the girls vaccinated went to A&E, to the emergency department, and I think quite hundreds of them were hospitalised, and they said it was safe and effective. Their conclusions are just totally incredible.
Steve is talking there about the Ontario study, which I will link in the notes. It followed up on almost 300,000 girls who got the vaccine, and it shows that there's no statistical association between the vaccine and the risk for developing an autoimmune disorder. And Steve is saying that that study is flawed. He's just plain wrong. I've checked the website Retraction Watch, which tracks scientific studies that have been retracted, and that study is just not there. I've also checked PubPeer, which is a website that allows anyone to raise any queries or disagreements they have about any scientific study. The Ontario study has exactly 0 entries. Therefore, there are no scientific queries over that study whatsoever. Hold on for that for 1 second. I've mentioned to you the claim by Anna Cannon that 1 girl in 30 has a very severe adverse reaction to the vaccine, and she claimed about long-term hospitalization and being wheelchair use. I want to play one other quote from Anna Cannon.
Given the current rate of incidence of cervical cancer in Ireland is only 13 in 100,000, the benefits of this vaccine hardly appear to outweigh the risks.
Now, that is a flat-out lie. I've looked up the figures. She says that the rate of cervical cancer is 13 in 100,000. That's simply untrue. It is 13 in 100,000 per year, which is an entirely different thing. So
no, it's not a different thing.
It most certainly is. Hold on for 1 second. If it's 13 per
100,000, it's 13 per 100,000. However many years.
No. It is valid to measure trivial or small illnesses such as a cold or whatever in incidence per year. It is not valid to measure fatal illnesses or potentially fatal illnesses in statistics per year. If I said that you only had a 1 in 80 chance of being shot in the head, you might think that sounds good. But if it's 1 in 80 chance for each of the 80 years of your life, then that would be a different thing entirely. Fatal illnesses, the correct way to represent them is lifetime risk. And the risk in Ireland is that one woman in about 110 is likely to get cervical cancer in her lifetime. So to say that it's entirely misleading to say that the chances...
You're actually leading to an area of my investigations that I'm quite keen on. Because what I've seen from government statistics on government websites, it's that young ladies in the UK, in England and Scotland, the government issue statistics on the number of cancers. Mm-hmm. They do it on cervical cancer and they do it by age group. Mm-hmm. And in the age group 20 to 24, the number of cervical cancers is actually increasing in recent years, more than before the vaccine was introduced. And by now, the girls that were first vaccinated in 2008 were 13-year-olds, but there was also a catch-up program for girls up to 18. So the vast majority of the girls in the young ladies in the 20 to 24 age group should now be 90% of them should be vaccinated.
Is this from published research?
It's not from research, it's from the government statistics of girls that have been of young ladies that have been diagnosed with cervical cancer. There's been a similar report in Sweden recently that the number of young ladies with cervical cancer in the younger age group of 20 to 24, most of which should be vaccinated, there's an increase in cervical cancers.
Sounds to me like anecdotal information. It's not something that I have found in my research.
This is government. This is government statistics.
The association.
This is government statistics.
I accept. Well, if you say that, I accept that, but I'm not sure that the association is government statistics. This just isn't true. I've studied up on the evidence that Steve sent, specifically about Sweden. Firstly, the supposed study was done in Sweden, but it was published in an Indian scientific journal called the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, which is a bit strange to say the least. Very quickly after publication, it was established that this study was by an author giving a fake name who lied about their academic institution. In fact, figures from Australia, where the vaccine was introduced in 2006, indicate that the numbers of new cervical cancers has halved. Nevertheless, I just want to focus on a couple of things. You've said that you have something like 500 girls in the UK. Regret claim 450 members. They haven't provided any substantiation of that. They haven't provided any evidence at all. And one thing that I've done is I've gone through line by line the report, the database from the HPRA, which is the Medicines Regulatory Authority in Ireland. It is blindingly clear that if those girls exist, their cases have most certainly not been reported to the HPRA. That's extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, no, because the World Health Organization and the MHRA, which is the equivalent in the UK, mm-hmm. they both acknowledge that adverse drug reporting is at best 10% for severe adverse reactions and only 1 to 2% for adverse reactions which are not severe.
Stephen, the Regret Group have been incredibly active. Stephen, the Regret Group have been incredibly active online. Anyone, literally anyone, can go onto the HPRA website and in 3 minutes make a report. Why on earth would they not do that?
With respect, in the UK, families or the public could report adverse drug reactions with the yellow card system. I think was introduced a few years ago. Mm-hmm. But still 88 to 90% of the reports are done by medical professionals. But when we did our questionnaire, we found that many medical professionals were refusing to raise yellow card reports for adverse vaccine reactions.
They don't need to. The families could do it themselves, presuming they existed.
Well, that's not fair, because originally the yellow card reporting system...
No, hang on a second. In Ireland, we have Regret. Hang on a second. We have this Regret, which is incredibly active online. They seem to exist almost entirely via their Twitter and Facebook pages. It would be a 5-minute exercise for them to send out a link to their members saying, please report this on the HPRA website. It is extraordinary. And the one thing that they claim is their demand is that they want an investigation launched. And that's not a bad idea if there is something to investigate, but there would be an investigation in the morning if that number of severe reactions were reported. Why not report them?
I can say to you that these adverse drug reactions, there are similar quantities, not the same, in the UK, in Denmark, in Japan, in Colombia, in the United States, in New Zealand and in Australia. It's not just Ireland. It is not just
That may be the case, but it is easier than booking an airline ticket to make a report. You must admit that it's at least curious that they haven't bothered to do that.
Please respect that our daughter was sleeping 23 hours a day. She went into a 3-month coma. She was struggling to eat. She was racked in pain. I had to leave my job. I had to help my wife to support our daughter. I was reasonably well paid and I got a reasonable pension. But there are many other families that have been destroyed by what this vaccine has done to them. I know of many divorces, of many self-employed that the business have gone because they've had to care for their daughters. And to expect them to be filling in online, not everybody in that age group goes online.
It's a ferociously active group online.
The leaders of the group may be ferociously active, but the parents that are having to care for the children that are so severely affected. I know so many of these children. I'll send you the documentary links, and you'll see some of the girls that have been affected.
Sure, and that's extremely emotive when you see an individual who is ill, and there's no doubt that that's extremely emotive, and your heart goes out to somebody who's that ill, whatever the cause is. But the point is that they have made a specific claim of 450 girls, and there is nothing to substantiate that. They have threatened legal action against anyone who has made inquiries to try and substantiate that, including myself, although that legal action, it wasn't a very credible legal threat, I have to say. In addition, on their fundraising page, Regret claimed that more than 200 girls were on 24-hour suicide watch. Now, I've spoken both to the Irish prison system and to the psychiatric hospital system, and it's clear that that number far and away exceeds all of the suicide watch places in all Irish prisons and all Irish psychiatric hospitals combined. It is just not credible that there are 200 people on 24-hour suicide watch that nobody has noticed.
I'm not here to criticise Regret. They've got similar situations with families that we have in the UK, that we've shared our information with Japan, who have a similar situation
but
with
Steve,
Denmark.
that's plainly a lie. It's plainly a lie that there are 200 girls on suicide watch.
I have, whether that's a lie or not, I'm not going to criticise it. What I do know is that on many of the girls that have been so severely affected, including my own daughter, these are the illnesses that they go through, to miss several years of their youth.
I'm not disputing the seriousness of the illness of those people.
I've got a one-page report that I will send you, a one-page report. It's HPV Vaccine Health Agency public statements versus true facts. And the true facts have been obtained by freedom of information requests and parliamentary questions. Here in the UK, typical statements from Public Health England, the JCVI, the MHRA, the NHS, with respect to the safety of HPV vaccines. They tell you they have a fact sheet, and they ask questions. Are side effects more frequently reported after HPV vaccine than for other vaccines? They say no. That's a lie, because I have copies of all of the annual reports from the MHRA to the JCVI, and there are more adverse reactions, 10 times more adverse reactions for the HPV vaccines than all the other vaccines in the national programme.
In journalism, I think one of the most important things is fact-checking. Yeah. And the claim that I have from Regret here is that they represent 450 girls who are seriously ill, of whom 200 plus are on 24-hour suicide watch. I know that the legal system in Ireland and the UK is quite similar. Ireland, for personal injury claims, it is considerably easier to sue, and awards tend to be considerably higher, even though we have a similar legal system. Not a single case has been taken before the courts. The Irish High Court routinely makes multi-million euro awards to people of ordinary means who've, for example, suffered a medical accident, or perhaps someone, a child was injured during a difficult birth. It's astonishing that not a single one of those 450 would have gone to court.
They have started to go to court in the USA, and the USA court...
No, they can't go to courts in the USA because they have an entirely different system, and I don't want to get into explaining different legal systems. Hold on for a second. Stephen, I am a skeptic and I am checking facts.
Yeah.
And if somebody tells me that they can prove that 450 people have been injured through gross negligence, which is what this would qualify as, and that not a single one of them has gone to court, that's astonishing.
There are cases that have gone to court, and it is
there are some
situations. I will send you the evidence. But here in the UK, I don't know what the situation is like in Ireland. The Department of Health, they defend. It's like a total brick wall. You cannot penetrate that brick wall because they defend. When there is an adverse vaccine,
people get sued, and the person who's being sued, the hospital, or they offer a defence. But people win medical negligence cases every day of the week.
For 10 years, the Department of Health denied that the GlaxoSmithKline pandemic flu vaccine was causing narcolepsy. After several years of denying, they started giving the pandemic flu vaccine, which has a similar, not the same, adjuvant as the Cervarix HPV vaccine. They started giving it to school children in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark.
But Stephen, you're not addressing the point.
I am addressing the point because suddenly they found that there was 1,000 cases of narcolepsy in Europe caused by the pandemic flu vaccine, and now they're accepting, and they're not going to court because the pharmaceutical companies don't want to go to court. There's over 100 cases in the UK of narcolepsy caused by pandemic flu vaccine. And we're
not talking about narcolepsy. I'm talking about the HPV Gardasil vaccine.
They're all being settled out of court.
No, that's not true. I can tell you that's exactly why that's not true. That is
absolutely true. That is absolutely.
Well, I can tell you for certain in Ireland it's not true because when a minor goes to court, it is an out-of-court settlement must be approved in public by a High Court judge, and that is open to being inspected and open to the press. There has not been a single case of a lawsuit by one of the supposed 450.
Not yet.
Well, this has supposedly been going on for 12 years.
The resistance that's being made, the pharmaceutical companies are putting so much money into governments and government agencies that they are resisting every which way they can to accepting that this vaccine is causing
Serve
the
them
problem.
with a writ. And let's remember, and I know that not everybody is a legal expert, and I'm not either, but in civil cases in the UK, like in Ireland, the standard of proof is 51%. That's to say the balance of probabilities. You don't have to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. You have to prove your case is more likely than unlikely. So it's a very low threshold. And the awards in Ireland for medical negligence can frequently be in the multi-million euro range, and certainly if something like this was the case, it would be in the multi-million euro range. It is simply not credible that there exists 450 severely ill girls, that none or almost none of them have reported their supposed adverse reaction to the HPRA, to the Medicines Authority. Not a single one of them has gone to court to sue. And that 200 of them are on a 24-hour suicide watch. But nobody has heard of that. I do not know
about the suicide watch, but here in the UK, when you ask the government...
That is a claim on the basis of which Regret is raising money. They're soliciting donations on the basis that they have 200 plus girls on 24-hour suicide watch.
I do not know that information. What I do know
I have a screen grab of it here.
When we ask the question in Parliament here in the UK, first of all, the JCVI and the MHRA state, and I'll just read out their statement. This is a public statement on the government website. The subcommittee received a report from the MHRA and noted that no serious risks have been identified associated with either HPV vaccine in the UK. So that's a subcommittee meeting of the JCVI, a report from the MHRA. But when you go down to parliamentary questions, there have been, I think it's 10,000 adverse reports, of 3,038 serious adverse reports, and yet they're saying there's none. This is clearly untrue. With Merck, the vaccine manufacturers, there were 40 deaths across the clinical studies.
Stephen, we've gone on this for a long time. I would appreciate if you send me the links or the documents that you're sending, because I want to include those in the notes for this podcast as well, and I will include references to what I've been saying. But I want to finish on one thing here, and I'm looking at a website called Spurious Correlations. And the website has graphs. And one of the graphs I have in front of me here is people drowned falling into a swimming pool compared to films that Nicolas Cage appeared in. And there's a very close correlation. There's another one here, the divorce rate in the state of Maine compared to the per capita consumption of margarine. And they're absolutely correlated. And there's another one, the age of Miss America correlates perfectly with murders by steam and hot objects. And the point is that if you're dealing with enormous numbers of statistics, by chance, it is likely that in some cases you will find some correlation which is just a coincidence. Isn't it possible that your daughter was just tragically ill at a time shortly after she got that vaccine, and that just didn't happen to millions of others, and that you were just unlucky?
Her illness, it was at a time, girls that are 12 and 13 is a developmental stage in children, mm-hmm. with the brain and with the hormones. Mm-hmm. And they were injected with a vaccine that has not been, it was fast-tracked. It wasn't checked. It wasn't thoroughly checked for safety. It wasn't checked for carcinogenicity, that it could cause cancer even. But it was fast-tracked. And when I was reading out
more than a dozen years ago, and it's been studied to death ever since with no adverse findings.
It hasn't been studied to death with no adverse findings. The findings are always that the number of girls that have had the vaccine and the number of girls that have had the so-called placebo that isn't a placebo are similar. And I will send you some information from Professor Chris Exley. Professor Chris Exley of Keele University in the UK. He is one of the world's leading scientists, expert witness used by courts in the UK for the neurotoxicity of aluminium, including aluminium in adjuvants, and it is killing people. It is damaging brains. I'll send you the scientific studies that have been done and that show all of this.
Stephen Hinks, I will put links, and if you send it to me, I will paste it into the notes for this website. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Record a contribution to be included in the next show. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Go to the website for sources and references for everything we were talking about, and I want to particularly acknowledge help from Dr. David Grimes, who helped me out with sourcing. And while you're at the website, please like the show on Facebook, follow @Here's How Podcast on Twitter, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or topic for a future show. Also, you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. It's all at www.here'show.ie. Also, just to remind you, I've created a Patreon account, so if you'd like to support the podcast and help make it more frequent with more research, I'd really appreciate that. The next show will be uploaded shortly. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.